In this lesson, we're going to be looking at calculating the circumference of a circle. As we've already learned, the circumference is the distance around the outside of a circle, and this works for any circle. What we need to do is we need to know at least one other piece of information for this circle. We either need to know what its radius is, so the distance from its center point to the outside edge, and that's true for the whole way around the circle, or its diameter, which, if you remember, is the furthest distance between the outside edges of a circle. So once we know one of those two pieces of information on any circle, we can actually calculate its circumference. And how we do that is you've already looked at measuring the circumference with a piece of string, and using that, comparing that to a ruler, and then you've measured either the radius, diameter, or both of circles, and sort of notice that there is a relationship that happens between those measurements. So mathematicians a long time ago looked at this, and they did a lot of this, and they figured it out, and they found a sort of a relationship, but it was always, you could times basically these numbers or multiply these numbers by this constant number. But that constant number, they were very close to knowing exactly what it was, but they didn't have an exact number, so they used a symbol, and this symbol we call pi. So it's basically just two lines with a line over top. Sometimes it looks more squiggly when they write it fancy, but it's basically just that symbol. And this is a constant number that you can always use to find the circumference of a circle, or if you already have the circumference, then finding either diameter or the radius. And this relationship basically says that to find the circumference of a circle, you can multiply this constant number times the diameter. Or if you don't have the diameter, we already know that the diameter is exactly 2 times the length of the radius, so you could just as easily write, to find the circumference, you can multiply 2 times pi times the radius. I could have said pi times 2 times the radius. You can rearrange these numbers any way you want to, as long as they're multiplying. It doesn't change anything. So that's sort of the standard way that it's written now. But it's just as true to say pi times 2 times the radius, if that's easier for you, just because you know that 2 times the radius is the diameter. Now, when you have this, now that we have this sort of relationship, we can also use the circumference to find out what the radius or the diameter is. So if we were looking for the diameter, we already know that it is that the diameter times this constant pi is going to give us the circumference. So if we take the circumference and divide it by that same number, that constant pi, then that will allow us to find the diameter. In the same way, if we took our radius, which we know if we times the radius by pi and the number 2, that'll give us our circumference. So if we take our circumference and divide it by 2 times the number pi, then that will also give us what the radius is. So this information can be very useful whenever we're working with circles. So I guess the last thing is, what is this number pi? So again, as I said, mathematicians to this day still don't exactly know what the number is, but they've come incredibly close, and they've used this number for sending satellites out into space for billions of kilometers, and and it's still actually way more than that, and they've been able to send it exactly where they want using a number that's so close. It's basically the number, but it's just they can't actually get to the end of it. But anyways, so for the purpose of uh, really most of life, and certainly for the purpose of grade 8, um, we can say that pi is equal to 3.14. It continues on at actually 1592, and it keeps going and going. And they found actually, I believe it's 7 trillion digits on pi. But even for very advanced things, usually having about, I don't know, 10 or 15 digits of pi would be more than enough. And in your regular everyday use of most things you're going to be doing, um, this 3.14 is plenty to get you a distance that you're going to need. So uh, as you work through problems where you're given either the circumference, then you can find the diameter and the radius, or if you're given a diameter or a radius, then you can find the circumference of a circle. So I hope you find this useful.